patch of blue here. I don't know whether that's the lake. I've got no idea where this lake is. These are cute fish. I can feel the weight of the challenge. Can't believe the quality of this fishing. It's mind-blowing. Yes! What a fish! When I got my text message, the challenge it contained was a little bit wicked actually. It was called Magnificent 7. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing magnificent about it. I've got to catch 7 different species of fish from one fishery complex, which is some gravel pits and a stretch of river at a place in Tansor, Northamptonshire. The place is actually called Bluebell Lakes. You know the rules. My travelling time is included in my 24-hour challenge. I got the text at round about 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'm almost at the lakes now, and it's going to be around about 3 o'clock. I've got 24 hours to achieve my objective, and I'm already down to 22. We're just running down the track to Bluebell now. I've actually been here before, so I know a little bit about it. I think it's a good choice of venue. It would have been very easy to achieve a 7 species challenge at a small stocked commercial still water of the type that you see people crowded around. But somewhere like this, beautiful gravel pits. There's one over here on the right hand side now. Look, I'll just open the window, look at that. Clear water, they've got a stretch of river, and it's naturally stocked, it's not overstocked. So the fishing's going to be very challenging. But hey, you know, the weather's great, and what a wonderful place to do it. Well, I think the trickiest part of this challenge is going to be getting the tactics right, because it's very bright and hot, not the best fishing conditions, especially in the middle part of the day. And what I've decided to do is to rely on instinct, just by wandering around the complex and looking for opportunities. Now, I've already seen, for example, a group of fish moving off that point on the backwater there, and I think they're chub, so I've got a good chance of catching one of those quickly. And you can see all the stuff that I've set up here, all the baits, all the rods and the rigs. And the reason I've done that is that when I'm walking around, if I see an opportunity, I can come back, grab a rod, grab some bait, and I'm fishing straight away with no wasted time. Well, even though I'm really keen to get fishing, I think it's worth me spending a little bit of time here just introducing some bait into the swim to try and get these fish competing. If I can lull them into a full sense of security and get them competitive, then I might catch a fish really quickly. So I'm going to waste a little bit of time in the hope that it's not wasted time, if you know what I mean. Here we go. Oh, yeah, now, first cast, I've got a fish on. Well, feeding the bait like that to increase the fish's confidence is exactly the right thing to do, because I'm off the mark on the very first cast with a chub. Now, it's not the biggest chub that I've ever caught, But fair's fair, it's one of the 7 species, and tactically that couldn't have been better. Well, I've had a few more throws, caught a couple of very small fish, nothing sizable, and I'm quite sure if I stayed here until dusk, I'd eventually nail a big chub, but that's not what I'm here for. I've got to catch as many fish as I can, so I think with that little bit of 10 minutes extra indulgence, it's time for me to go and try and find another species. Well, I've gone off to a flying start already. I've had my chub, and I'm parked up now next to a lake called Mallard. It's quite a famous lake here at Bluebell, and I'm going to have a look round now, see if I can find some fish on the surface, because it's a hot day, and I think catching a carp here at Bluebell is going to be probably the toughest part of this challenge, especially in the conditions. And to stay on the move, here's a tip for you. If you're worried about carrying any stalking tackle or floater gear around, just get yourself the right unhooking mat, like this one. Zip all your bits and pieces that you want into it. And there you go. Nice old stalker sling. So I'm going to walk around the lake now. I'm going to be looking for carp on the surface. Well, I'm 4 hours into the challenge now, and I'm worried. I've come down to this quiet corner of the lake expecting it to be full of carp basking on the surface, and there's none here. There's just none showing. Now, it took me a couple of hours to drive here, about an hour to set my gear up, then I caught the chub and then came round here. So the clock's ticking, and to be honest, I think a carp from Bluebell Lakes is absolutely essential if I'm going to get 7 species, and I really thought I'd get one off the top. I'm not, they're not there, so I think I've got to try and find a way of catching a carp at some point in the next 20 hours, off the bottom, off the top, mid-water, it doesn't matter, but it's going to be tougher than I thought. I think now I've got to forget the floater fishing because it's not going to work, and just get on the move and see what I can find. Part of my game plan, I'd already decided that I would fish this lake in the evening for the bream, using sort of conventional bream tactics, quiver tip rod and a swim feeder maybe. But I've noticed a very dark mass of fish just under the surface down here as I was walking by, and speaking to the guy in the swim next door, he said it's a very big shoulder bream. He's tried putting bread over them and stuff, they won't take off the surface. But I'm basically going to suspend a bait under a float right where they are and see if one of them will, you know, make a mistake. It might either take the bait or breathe in at the wrong time. Let's see. Well, I had a bite there. It may not have been one of those bream, but the float went under. Could be a small fish like a small roach or something like that, or a little rudd. But remember, it's a species challenge, so it doesn't matter. It'll count. What I'm trying to do, I've fixed the float really shallow. It's about 18 inches deep. I'm just going to try and hang the maggots in the faces of the fish I can see out there. They're just under the surface. They really don't seem interested in taking the loose feed, but you never know. It's worth a 10-minute diversion. I've gone over the fish now and just drag back into them. The float's gone down again. I've got a fish, but it's not a bream. Ah, it's come off, and it was a perch as well. I don't believe it. I just saw a small perch. I'm sure it was a perch, and that's one of the species on my list. Well, I haven't got a bream, but, well, actually, I kind of have. I think it's a hybrid. I think it's the result of two species of fish breeding together. And its shape suggests to me that it's a roach bream hybrid. But the colour suggests that there might even be a little bit of rudd in there, but I'm pretty sure it's a roach bream hybrid. The lips are level, that's always a sign that something is hybrid-like about it, and the body shape's bream-like, the colour's a little bit roach rudd-like. I think that's licorice all sorts, and I can't even claim that as a species. So I've lost a perch and I've caught a hybrid. Brilliant. That's great. So I'm 5 hours in and beginning to think I might be up the creek without a paddle actually. There's nothing to going for me. Well, I'm in a real dilemma here. I know I'm actually wasting time. I drove past this lake on my way to another one at the far end of the complex. This is called Swan Lake. Yeah, I know. But anyway, I drove past this lake and this shallow end immediately caught my attention on, you know, such a hot day. It's the sort of place where you're going to find carp. And sure enough, I saw a big fish just head and shoulder. So I couldn't resist stopping here and sprinkling out some floaters. There's several good fish out in these shallows, but they won't take. They're just sunbathing. And I know that I'm wasting my time. I'm 6 hours into the challenge and I'm sitting here wasting time, but the fisherman in me won't let go of the possibility that I might get one of these great big carp out of here. So I'm just going to give it another 5 minutes. I know I've got to move on. Well, I'm just trimming my hook bait down here because there's some very, very canny fish here in Swan Lake. Most of the fish are over 30 pounds and some of them are over 40. So there's some real big boys out there. And it's been so tempting to stay here. I've been trickling some floating baits in on the edge of this weed bed and I've seen one or two really big carp come up to take them. They're not having them one after the other. They're not going crazy. But I've had fish that close to my hook bait, really big fish. I've actually had them circling my hook bait and coming in between my hook bait and the controller float. And it's been so frustrating. I've gambled over an hour of my time on sitting here and putting out some floating baits. But I know in my heart of hearts, I should really move on and try and pick some lower apples. The problem is, as an angler, I just can't help myself. Well, the sun's starting to dip down now. The heat's going out of the day, and in a moment I'm going to try some bream fishing here on Bluebell Lake. And I think it could be successful now that we're at the back end and the light's improving. And it's also a good time before I do that to try a little bit of spinning, because I'm way down on this species challenge. I've got to catch 7 altogether. I've only got 1, which is a chub. I've wasted a pile of time fishing for carp, and that's why I'm trying a little bit of spinning in case I can pick up a bonus perch or pike before I try some bream fishing. Well, I really have wasted a huge amount of time fishing for carp. I'd do the same thing all over again though if I saw 30s and 40s swimming around like that. But now the light's going, I'm starting to worry about meeting this challenge, and I'm blasting around with this spinner, fishing here on the backwater, on the main river, and of course in the lakes, just in the hope of picking up a bonus predatory fish.
Got him.
Oh. Well, that was a really lucky fish, I think. He came absolutely hammering up out of these cabbages. It's not a very big pike, but it's a pike, and look, he's covered in cabbages. I've got to be careful here because this lure has got several hooks on it. So let's just have a look. And as you can see, this is far from being the biggest pike I've ever caught, but it's a beautiful, well-conditioned little fish actually, isn't it? With wonderful markings. Of course, the thing with juvenile pike is they've got very much these almost tiger stripes that extend down from the back, and as they get older they lose those a little bit. But this one, because he's still quite a juvenile fish, he's still got a little bit of his juvenile markings, and he's crossing over to the adult markings. So that's a really beautiful pike, and I think he's been scoffing a lot of bleak in this river because he's in spanking condition. Well, let's put this back. The water's lovely and clear, and look at that, he's just shot straight away. I think he was a bit hacked off at being caught. Well, that's a relief, a real relief, because that gives me 2 species now, and I've still got enough light to fish for the bream. But I might try a couple of casts for a perch on a spinner, perhaps a bit lower down. We're on the River Nene here, and it's navigable. That's why I've got a lock cutting behind me. And this place absolutely reeks of perch. Perch love structure, and these lock gates and all of the concrete and pilings around here are perfect habitat for the perch. So if I don't get one on the spinner, and I really haven't got much time left now, I'm definitely going to come back here tomorrow and see if I can get one on a worm, because if there isn't a nice perch here, I'll eat my hat. Well, it's all going a bit frantic, but before I start bream fishing, I can see some silverfish topping out here in the swim. So I've got my float rod very quickly, and I'm just going to have 5 minutes on the waggler, just putting a bit of maggot in case I can catch one of these fish. They could be roach, they could be rudd. I think they'd be one of the 2 species anyway. Hopefully they're not hybrids. And at the moment, they're not taking, but it's not to say I won't get one. Now, what's this? Ah, it's come off, I don't believe it. I think I must have shot a robin on the way in or something, I don't believe it. I've just hooked another silverfish, which probably was a roach, I guess, and it's come off. Well, I'm on 2 species. I would like to go to bed on 4 actually. One of which would be a bream, and one might be a nice roach. or a rudd, I don't mind, I'm not too fussy actually. I really would like to improve on my tally. Right, here we go, what's this one? Oh, now I think I might have actually cracked it off at the last minute. I was expecting another hybrid. I'm pretty sure this is a roach. I've been honest enough to admit to the hybrids. This one, just on a quick visual check, it's got all the right characteristics of a roach. So I'm going to claim this one. As far as I'm concerned, it is a roach. I've caught it almost at the last knockings, and I've still got time to make a few casts on the feeder with a bream in mind. And if necessary, I'll even go into the dark. Well, it's not the biggest roach in the world, but it is a roach, and it's my roach, and that one brings me up to 3 species. Well, I've got a bigger hook bait here because I'm going to fill this feeder with some pellet ground bait. I'm going to go for a bream now. This is pellet ground bait with a little bit of hemp and small pellets, fine pellets. I'm going to put a few maggots in there, and then just cap it off with a bit more of this nice crumb. Now, earlier on, I actually put a few balls of ground bait out here, so it's not as if I'm fishing over an unprepared swim. And it is quite a good bream area, this, I'm told. Well, we're on the last hour of light. In fact, not even that much, and I prepared this swim earlier on by putting out some balls of ground bait at the range I'm fishing, and I must admit I fully expected the bream to be coming in at this time of night and maybe feeding on the area, and there's not a sign of it yet, so maybe they're not coming at all. I'm 8 hours into the challenge, and it's been a really tough day, very energy sapping, hot and sticky. The fishing hasn't been good for me or anyone else down here. It's really tricky conditions. I've spoken to some of the other fishermen and really couldn't have picked a worse time to come here. And now I've got a choice to make. Do I fish on into the dark and make myself even more tired, or do I cut and run, get a few hours sleep and get up early in the morning and try and make up the difference? I think that's what I'm going to do. I've caught 3 species so far. I've got 4 species to go. Let's just hope that tomorrow is a lot easier than today. It's dawn and I've got 8 hours to go in my fishing challenge to catch 7 species of fish here at Bluebell Lakes. So far I've caught 3, so I've really got to get my skates on for what's left of the day. I've woken up at dawn and now it's time for some classic stuff. There's a small pit here at the back of Bluebell Lakes that's almost been forgotten about, but it contains some nice fish. There's bream and carp, perch, tench in there. Who knows what we're going to catch, and this is going to be classic stuff. Just to celebrate the occasion, I've rigged up an old quill float, a porcupine quill. There you are, lads, that will bring back a few memories, and I'm going to fish it the old-fashioned way and hopefully reduce that species tally. Well, this is very traditional tactics now. I'm just got the minimum of gear, wandering around the lake. It's gone very, very shallow. There's been a drought this year, and I'm just gonna flick a piece of bread flake out and fish it traditional style with the quill lane flat and the bottom shot just touching the bottom. You can't do this at any range or on a big water, but on a really small enclosed place like this, it's a lovely old-fashioned way to do it. And of course, the great thing is if I get a bite, the quill will just dither a little bit and then slide across the surface. Now what I'm hoping for is to reduce the species tally, of course, because I still need 4 different species of fish, and there's at least that number in here, so any one of them would do, to be honest. Well, it's hard to believe that on a beautiful classic angling morning like this one, with so much mist and fantastic light, that the fishing's so poor, but it really is. There's been a drought here in this part of the country this year, and I can see that the water level's much lower than it should be, and I think that's really affected the fishing. There's just nothing happening. This small lake's absolutely dead, but I've got to be positive, and I think what I'm going to do now is go down to the river and spend some time looking and see if I can see some either big perch or roach or something in the river and target them visually, because this is really turning into a grueler. Beautiful place to fish, of course. I'm just going to flick a float out and trot a couple of maggots down, see what turns up. Oh, there's a bite straight away. That is absolutely tiny. It's an interesting fish, the bleak. They used to be harvested commercially, you know. They're after the scales, which come off very easily. It's why I'm holding it on the flat of my hand. And I'm not quite sure what the scales were used for, but they're very pearlescent, small silver scales. They were probably used in making fake pearls or, I don't know, jewellery perhaps. But anyway, the bleak's quite a rare fish these days. They're prolific where you find them, but not so many rivers with them in. They live in large shoals, feeding largely up near the surface, and they're all thin like razor blades. But this one, even though it's a very small fish, is very welcome, because under the rules of this challenge, all the species count, big or small. Well, 6 hours to go, and all I can get is loads and loads of small fish, little bleak, little chub, So I'm going to go for another species now using an old-fashioned technique. I'm going to float fish with one of these small fish as bait. It might get me that bonus perch that I'm after, because I've tried and tried with the worms. I can't pick one up, but who knows, they must be feeding on those small fishes. We'll give it a go. Well, I've just missed a take right underneath my rod tip. It's a good sign, I guess. Just a bit annoying to miss a chance like that. What I'm doing is just using the small fish that I caught earlier on. It's an old-fashioned technique. I'm using quite a big, chunky, chubber type float. Got to remember that the most abundant food source during the summer and the autumn for many of the fish in here are other small fishes. So let's just keep our eye on this float. I'll lower it in by these bulrushes here. There he goes. Yeah. Well, I'm in, and I think it's a decent perch. Got to be careful here in the bulrushes. I've got to play the fish pretty hard, really, because there's a lot of snags here. Yeah, that's great. Whew. Well, that was a real tactical gamble that paid off. And there it is, an absolutely beautiful perch. And the hook's just jammed right into the corner of his mouth. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful fish. Well, I caught this beautiful perch using an old-fashioned method, just with a float-fished small fish bait just below a weir pool. Classic angling, and it's a beautiful looking fish. I've got about 5 hours of the challenge left to go. I need 2 more species, and this perch has given me hope that maybe I might just make it, even though the weather's deteriorating and the sun's getting stronger. Well, that's great, and I'd love to sit here and catch another one, but I know I haven't got time. Well, we've got about 3 hours of the challenge to go now. I'm still 2 species down, and it's extremely hot, very bright, and I think the only chance I've got of a fish is to fish on the surface. So I'm back on the same lake that I spent a lot of time on yesterday, and similarly I can see quite a few fish in the weed beds out in front of me, but I think it's going to be very difficult to get a take, because it's tempting to think that these fish are looking up to the surface. In actual fact, what I think they're doing is digging snails out of this soft weed, because you're just seeing tails going over all the time and fins, and they're very preoccupied with them. They're going to be hard to catch, but what else can I do? I've got 2 species to catch and almost impossible conditions. I've got a good fish take in there. I think it might be a grass carp. Well, as you can see, I've moved lakes. I'm still floater fishing because it's just about the only chance in this blistering heat. The fish on the other lake, I think, were very preoccupied with feeding in the weed. But here we've got some open water. I'm trickling some baits down on the wind and just hoping I can switch the carp to feed on the surface. But do I think I'll do it? Probably not. And this is an honest programme. There's no cheating or fudging. We tell it like it is. And the fact of the matter is that at the moment, the fishing conditions are just virtually impossible. The fish have switched off, it's boiling hot. And do I think I'll do the challenge with 2 hours to go? Frankly, I doubt it. Well, this is absolutely remarkable. There's about an hour of the challenge to go. Boiling hot sunshine, and my tactic of fishing in the shade of this tree has worked. The float just went away out of the blue. Been fishing here for about half an hour, and I'm into a very slow moving fish, which has got to be a bream. It's not moving quickly enough for it to be a carp. It's a real plodder, and look at this thing. From such a small piece of water. Well, this gives me a real fighting chance now, because all I need is another species, and I mean, that's not a bad bream at all, especially on a boiling hot day. Wow, yes, look at that. Great big bream from a little water like this. Amazing. It's a good one. It's 5 or 6 pounds, I should think. We'll go and have a look at it. Well, that's a very nice fish. I won't keep it out of the water long because it's very, very hot today. But it just goes to show that even in these difficult conditions, that perseverance and possibly the superior presentation of the pole when the fish are a little bit iffy has paid off. There it is. A nice bream, probably about 5 pounds, which from a small water like that is a very, very good result. Well, I'm delighted about that. There's just under an hour of the challenge to go. I'm going to go stalking, see if I can find one of the species I haven't caught so far, and you never know, I might just squeak in. Well, there's less than an hour to go now, so it's so hot. It's unbelievably hot. It's been a long time since I've fished in heat like this. It must be mid-30s, and the water's well down. The fish have just switched off completely. I'm looking to see if I can see anything moving in this small lake. Just might give me a last chance, but I'm not optimistic. Just a fin wake or a movement, anything. Just dead. He's underneath us. He's looked at it. Here he goes. Oh, he's nosed it. He doesn't want it. He might come back round. He's seen that now. Oh, there he is. He's got it. He's had a go at it. See that then? He's got it. Oh, don't believe it. Okay, so I caught 6 out of the 7 species, and that bream raised my hopes towards the end and gave me, well, the possibility in that last hour of doing it, but in the end the conditions beat me. And let's face it, some of the fish were small, so it wasn't a glorious session. The one that eluded me was the carp, and that's frustrating. But the conditions haven't been easy, and you know, if you went out and caught all the fish you wanted every time, you'd stop fishing, wouldn't you? And you know, we've got a phrase in our sport, sometimes when you don't catch them, that's fishing.